Welcome to this tutorial using Photoshop CS3 to create a user icon for a social network. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new file. Go to the File menu in Photoshop, File, New, and we're going to use a custom preset where we get to select how big we want the size to be. So we're going to make it 600 by 600 pixels. So you'll have to select pixels, make sure it's not in inches, select pixels. Resolution 300, RGB 8-bit with a white background. And we're going to name it our initials. So mine's BP icon. And we'll say OK. And here's our 600 by 600 pixel new file. And if you look right here, it's giving you rulers, and this is actually in inches. If you double click on the ruler, it'll take you to the preferences for it. So instead of inches, we can show you pixels and say OK. So you'll see that is 600 pixels by 600 pixels. And what we're going to do is simply create a background layer and a text layer. So layers can be found over here. When you create a new project, it opens up with a background that's locked. So to unlock it, you have to double click that. And we're going to keep it as layer 0. Say OK. So now that it's unlocked, we can do things with it. And in this layer, I'm going to add a gradient background, a very simple background. So if you look in your Tools palette, you can find the Paint Bucket tool. And if you click and hold on it, it's going to take you to this submenu, and we're going to grab the Gradient tool. And then if you look at the top here, you can click to open the gradient editor. Now in the gradient editor, they have some presets, but you can build your own, and what I'm going to do is actually build my own. And down at the bottom is the color stop, up at the top is the opacity stop. So the color stop, if you click on it, it selects what you're currently working on. You can change the color. I have this set to only web colors, so I can turn that off and give us a more range of colors. But we're going to go and make the first color stop kind of grayish, very light gray, and we're going to make the second color stop a little bit darker gray. Say OK. And if you look at the top here, opacity, if I was to select opacity and then turn it down, it would go from gray to see-through. So that's what opacity is. If it's at 100%, you can't see through it, and it'll be whatever that color is. If it's down at 0%, you can fully see through it, and you won't be able to see any color. At 50%, it'll be half the opacity. You can kind of see through. So we'll leave that all the way up at the top, and we're going to just work with a solid gradient from light gray to a darker gray and say OK. And there's a couple different options for the type of gradient you want. So linear would be, if I draw a line, I click and I start where I want the gradient to start and let go where I want the gradient to stop. So it's actually set to reverse. So if I do that again, now it's going to look exactly what you see in the gradient editor view up here. So it's going to start light and go to a dark. And what I want to do is, instead of drawing a linear gradient, I want a radial gradient, radial like a circle. And you start in the middle and click to the outside edge, and it'll create this orb-like background. So that's a simple way to create a very simple but interesting and nicely designed background. And what I'm going to do next is create a second layer. So this icon down at the bottom will create a new layer. And you want to put different graphic elements on different layers so you can move them separately from each other. So I'm going to put the text on a different layer than the background so I can move the text around. So if I click the text tool and then click in my design here, I can start to type. So I don't want to type nothing. I'm just going to do my initials, so BP, and I'm going to make this larger. So instead of 8 point, let's go up to 72. And I'm going to use the move tool now to move this around. So that's actually a decent design. I kind of like the font type. I can pick different fonts if I select the text tool and click in to the text layer. If you click outside of the text layer with the text tool, if I go back to the move tool and then click like up here, it'll create a new layer. So you don't want to go creating a bunch of new layers. You want to make sure you click directly into that layer. So to delete a layer, click and drag it to the trash can. So I'm going to select this layer and I'm going to use the text tool. I'm going to click right in this layer. So if it has the box, that'll be creating a new layer. So yeah, it has the box around the mouse icon. And if I'm in the text area, it doesn't have the box. So if I click in there, now I'm currently selecting the text. So if I wanted to change that text to a different font, you can look in your fonts here, and I'm actually going to go to Helvetica. Is one of my favorite fonts because it's very simple and it usually looks good in most designs. So bold, and that's going to be too small, and I actually want to make this strong, and I'm going to take this from 72, and you can start typing to make it larger. So let's try 125, and I'll move this. That's actually a little bit too big, so text tool. Drag out this window so I can see it a little bit better. Slightly too big. And another way to edit the text, if you go into this character palette, I can grab the text. As long as the layer is selected, I'll be able to change it here. So let's go with 110. Now that's looking a little bit like it's going to fit. And I'm actually going to try something. So if I wanted to squeeze these letters closer together, that's this drop-down menu here. Let's go with -100. Let's say we can crank it up a little bit. Let's try -200. 1200, 200. So these are touching, and I actually like the look of that. So I'm just kind of messing around to try new things. And that's an interesting look, but I think I'm going to go a little bit larger. If we wanted to change the color here, that's you can click into the character palette, or you can use the text tool and select your text and click into the palette to change your color. Darker looks interesting. Totally dark looks. It's kind of nice to add the color, but I think I'm going to stay in grayscale. And dark kind of gives it a little bit of separation. If I get close to the outside color, it kind of blends. So right there looks pretty good, and I'm going to deselect, and now I can, if I wanted to, because these are on separate layers, I can move this around. If they were on the same layer, it'd be stuck together and the background would move at the same time. Layers work in stacking order, so you're going to want to make sure that they're in the right order. If I move the background above the text layer, the text will not be below and you won't be able to see it. So you'll have to stack them accordingly over here. That's how you see the topmost layer above the layers beneath it. So that's kind of the gist of the tutorial. There are other options to jazz up your text that I have a tutorial for below. But what we're going to do now is save this. So talking about saving file, save as. Now a Photoshop file keeps all of the layer information, and it's a pretty big file, and you don't really put Photoshop files on the web or use them other than in Photoshop. You want to use a picture file and compress it, but we'll save both so that if we wanted to go back to this and edit it, we can. So what I would like to do is go into the home icon. I'm going to make a new folder in my home icon, and I'm going to call this VP icon. Actually, let's date this. We're going to date all the files that we make. So 9-5-12, and we're going to create that folder. And I'm also going to 9-5-12 date the file, and then we're going to save that within the folder, and it's a Photoshop file. Save it, say OK. Okay, so we have the Photoshop file saved. Now we're going to save a picture file, so save as, and we're going to change it, and we're going to use JPEG. JPEG is a compressed format, meaning it's losing some information, but it's saving space. So we'll save it, and you can leave it at maximum, and if you turn it down, you can see that the file size gets smaller, but we'll leave it at the maximum and say OK. And that's also saving in the same folder. So if I go in my Finder, I'll be able to navigate into this home icon area, the date, BP icon, and here is the JPEG file, and here is the Photoshop file. And if I hit the spacebar, you can see a preview of the file. And this is the file that we would upload to the social network. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial.